everyone, welcome to this Multilingual Matters online event. I'm Flo from Multilingual Matters. I'm joined by my colleague Laura in the headphones, who's doing the technical side of Zoom for us today. And today I'll be speaking to Rebecca Oxford, María Matilde Olivero, Melinda Harrison and Tammy Gregersen about their soon-to-be published book, Peacebuilding in Language Education. During the event, if you have any questions for the editors at any point, please do make sure to use the chat function on Zoom. Laura will be monitoring that and we'll try and get through as many of your questions as we can during the event. And we'll also be offering a 50% discount code on the book at the end, so stay tuned for that as well. Peacebuilding in Language Education shares wisdom and practical strategies to help language teachers, teacher educators and peace educators to communicate peace, contribute to peace and weave peacebuilding into classrooms and daily life. And before I ask my first question, I'd just like to let the editors introduce themselves briefly, starting with Rebecca.
I'm Rebecca, and I'm sitting here in Greece. You can see the background. I'm in Alabama in southeastern United States, and I'm very glad to be here with you.
Matilde.
Hi, I'm Matilde Olivero. I say hi from Argentina, to be more specific, from the hills, my favorite place on earth. I'm a teacher educator and a researcher, and I work at National University of Rio Cuarto here in Argentina. And I've been working with peace-building approaches and effective factors for several years now. So hi, everybody. And this is my first book, so I'm thrilled to be part of this event.
Thanks. Melinda?
Hi, I'm Melinda Harrison. I am a full-time lecturer in the Department of English and Philosophy at Auburn University at Montgomery. I live in Birmingham, Alabama, so I am just an hour and a half south of Dr. Oxford. I am also working on my PhD in Education Studies in Applied Linguistics, Education Studies in Diverse Populations at the University of Alabama at Birmingham.
Thanks. And Tammy?
Hi, everybody. You know what? I'm looking over at the list of participants and I'm so thrilled. I recognize so many names, especially to all of my friends who I haven't seen because of this COVID crisis. So hello to all of you and thank you for joining us. I'm Tammy Gregersen and I'm coming live at you from the United Arab Emirates, Sharjah to be specific. I am stuck in my house and I'm going stir crazy. So I'm be involved with everybody on the worldwide event. And just thanks so much for being here because it makes me feel like there's life outside of my apartment. So thanks for joining us, guys. I can't wait to share what we've got ready for you.
Okay, thanks, Tammy. So my first question is to Rebecca and Melinda. And it's, what peace-related themes does the book cover?
Well, the whole book, 16 chapters, contains many different themes. I'll just name some of them that you might be interested in. Peace building in the classroom, teaching students to be peace builders themselves, teaching future teachers to be peace builders, and helping ourselves to know what it's all about. How to be more peaceful in our inner lives and in our experiences with our students and with the outside world. And of course, things are different now because education is mostly on Zoom. So the other themes that we really like are positive psychology, which, like peace, and that's Tammy's great contribution to the world and to our field, positive psychology, which basically takes a look at what is the best within us. How can we reach that best? How can we draw that out in ourselves and in our relationships? And in anything that we are doing in our lives. We also have a theme of international faculty who are teaching in English-speaking universities, mainly in the United States. And what do they face in terms of peace challenges? And what do the international students have to deal with when they are being accustomed to a new culture? So many different themes. Tammy, would you like to say something about the verbal and nonverbal theme?
Oh, yeah. The chapter that Peter McIntyre and I contributed on, oh, I miss you too, Alan Casella. The one thing that we were looking at was how we do know that the nonverbal channel of communication is the channel by which we communicate most of our emotion. And a lot of what we do in terms of intrapersonal peace and interpersonal peace, we communicate that a lot non-verbally. And so Peter and I took a look at different ideas, classroom ideas on how to be using peace and nonverbal in the language classroom, combining all three of the strands of language, nonverbal communication, and peace. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the chapter.
Melinda, I don't know if you want to add to what Rebecca said.
She covered it pretty well. I will say that we have organized the book in terms of and organized these themes as they fall with Rebecca's multidimensional aspects of peace that she has written about in the past many times. Interpersonal peace, inner peace, ecological peace, international peace. Rebecca, what am I leaving out here?
Intercultural.
Intercultural.
Intergroup.
Intergroup peace. And so we've tried to organize these chapters to address those dimensions of peace in a way that readers can go to those sections and read about those themes. The threads that go through all of those sections do cover exactly what Rebecca was talking about. But I think the larger thing here too is that this is about education, and language is in all education. So while we might be talking about pre-service teachers or in-service teachers who are going to be or are language educators, we're also and how we can build peace with our students who are language learners. I think that we have found that these themes can also be applied to all aspects of education, whether that's K through 12, as we call that in the United States, kindergarten through high school, or whether that's post-secondary in the university and college environment, or whether that's an adult education. So I think that there is such an interweaving of these themes throughout the book, and we've tried to organize it with those dimensions of peace in mind.
Oh, I have one other quick thing. I just saw that Andy is online. So hi, Andy.
Many of the authors are. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of the people.
Yeah.
We're so glad to see you and friends from all over the world. One of the themes in the book that we have not mentioned is the concept of peace language and peace linguistics. And Andy is on the forefront of the peace linguistics area. And we have several chapters that deal with negative language in the sense of hate speech, and then very positive language, and how these things are interwoven, and how we can understand them and most readily help students speak in a more positive tone and not get swept up in the kinds of very destructive language that you sometimes hear at this particular time in history. We don't even have to talk about it. All you have to do is look on the daily news or read a newspaper and you know what I'm talking about.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Thanks, Rebecca. This question for Tammy. The book opens with the question, what is peace? How would you answer that to those in the audience who are wondering the same thing? And more specifically, how does the concept of peace relate to language education?
Yeah, good question. So, you know what, I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of what Rebecca said. When, you know, there's the negative side of something that's positive. And what happens oftentimes when we look at peace is we look at the absence of, you know, we look at the absence of aggression or the absence of conflict or the absence of inequality, right? But one of the things that some of the authors have used in the book is the whole idea of peace being positive. So it really kind of transforms the question from what prevents peace, right? Like conflict, aggression, and it turns it into what invites peace, right? So if you look at something like positive psychology, for example, and, you know, the psychologists have been saying since the year 2000, when they, you know, Seligman first began, you know, the whole idea of positive psychology. One of the things that happens is that psychologists for years and years and years have been looking at a deficit perspective. What's wrong with us as human beings, right? We've got neurosis and psychosis and anxiety, and all of those things are very important, right? But it fails to look at what is good and what is well about humanity. So the same thing can kind of be said about peace, right? The question is, what is it that we are striving for? Like positive psychology, can we focus on what peace is rather than what it's not, right? So we're once we know what it is, it's also easier to evaluate the outcomes, right? It's hard to evaluate the absence of something, right? It's much easier to evaluate something that's actually present. You know, one of the other things is that I want to share an anecdote because it's kind of a fun thing. We start the book with this crazy idea that I had. I live in the United Arab Emirates and I teach at the American University of Sharjah. I love it here. And one of the reasons I love it so much is because it's such a microcosm of multiculturalism. I mean, you know, I have a graduate class right now with 15 students and there's 12 countries represented, right? So it's just the most amazing place. And I'm in the Middle East, right? And so I thought it would be really cool to just kind of do this informal thing. So I ran around, we have a Starbucks on campus, by the way. I ran around the Starbucks and I was asking people, you know, what is peace? And it was interesting. The first student I asked was a Palestinian student who's living in the UAE that doesn't have a passport from anywhere. And so he was sitting there with his friend from Yemen. And I asked, what is peace? And the Palestinian guy said, well, you know what, it's no war between countries. And the Yemeni guy said, and it's equality between genders. He wanted to make sure that he got that in there. But then, you know what, so then I went around and I continued my informal survey and I ended up with 22 students. I had like an hour to do it. I had 22 students and okay, I'll tell you, I had 10 females and 12 males, okay? I had a student from Bangladesh, 2 from Jordan, 1 from England, 2 from Sudan, 1 from Palestine with Syrian documents, 1 Syrian, 1 Palestinian with Jordanian documents, 1 Lebanese with Belgian documents, because here in the UAE, you have to say, what ethnicity or where are you from? And then what documents do you have? Because they're 2 different things. But anyway, what I was fascinated by was that almost invariably, except for the Palestinian guy who said no war between countries, almost everybody in my informal survey mentioned peace as something that was either inside the person or interpersonal with other people. And what Rebecca's model does is, and I'll explain it right now for just a second, because it's really important, because you can't have any of the other kinds of peace unless you have that inner peace, you know, that inner Zen that we find when we feel that we're at peace ourselves, right? And so it's then when we have our inner peace that we're actually able to reach out to others, right? And reaching out to others, then we have interpersonal peace, right? I reach out to Rebecca, I send her a loving email. I say, hey, I love you, sweetie. How you? We've got some good some interpersonal peace going on, right? But then when that interpersonal peace is reached, then we can have intergroup peace, right? And then from intergroup, we can go to intercultural, right? So if my intergroup, we've got, the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States right now. We've got the groups trying to find peace with one another. But then we have intercultural peace, which is even larger. And then, of course, we've got international peace, which means, it's a much more political idea. And then we've got the peace with the environment, peace with the ecology. So anyway, what happened? I had all of these students that I was asking, and most of them said that it was mostly inner peace. They said things like being happy where you are, understanding one's limitations, being on good terms with life, right? And then other people were saying, peaceful first with yourself allows you to be peaceful with others, being on good terms with a person. But then, you know what? I was fascinated by this because here I am, right? Here I am in the UAE thinking, wow, I'm in the Persian Gulf and nobody's talking about, anything but inner peace and interpersonal peace. And I was fascinated by that. And so I had finished my survey and I sat down at a table and I mentioned to one of my students who is a Palestinian, I said, hey, you know what? This is what I found. And I told her about what I had found with the inner peace and the interpersonal peace. And she told me, yeah, but Dr. Tammy, it's because right now we feel safe where we are. If you went to Palestine and asked me what is peace, just the context of where I am is going to give you a different answer from how I respond. And I thought that was such an amazingly insightful answer, because peace is contextualized, and how to find peace has to be contextualized, right? So you're going to find all kinds of amazing ways of looking at peace in the book. And I need to say this one, then I'll let the mic go. I'll let someone else have the mic. We've stood on the shoulders of giants. The only reason that we're able to talk about peace the way we have now is because other people have come before us and have studied this and looked at it and given us so many great insights. So yeah, I'll shut up and let someone else talk now.
Thanks very much, Tammy. Matilde.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thanks. Here in the UK and probably in a lot of classrooms around the world, there's pressure to get through a vast curriculum and to gear students up for exams and assessments. Do you think there's really space to teach peace in the language classroom? And have you got any tips for how it might be incorporated into everyday learning?
Oh, yeah. By the way, what Tammy was telling you about what peace is, that's part of our chapter 1, where she talks about this great survey that she did, and where we conceptualize peace, right? And the notions of peace being positive, as she was telling you about, right? Working with conflict and not just thinking that peace is going to be the absence of any kind of conflict or violence, right? Because unfortunately, we don't live in such a world. So yeah, great. Thank you, Tammy, for your wonderful explanation on that. But you can read that in chapter 1, right? Going back to your question, Flo, yeah, well, it happened to me, and I think that it happened to all of us when the pandemic hit us, and then we had to go and teach remotely from night to day. That teachers were kind of with this pressure of including the contents, right? And the contents, and the more the better, and making sure that students learned. But if peace is not developed, embodied, and reflected upon in this context in particular, right? It's always important, but I think that this pandemic has taught us that it's more important than ever to create spaces, even virtually, where peace can flourish, where we can connect as humans, where we have the classroom atmosphere that allow the conditions for learning and for teaching to take place, right? And the peace dimensions that Mel and Tammy were talking about are really necessary for these conditions, right, that I was telling you about for learning and teaching to flourish. So what happened to me was, well, at the beginning, I was kind of stressed, as the same as the students. And then what we did was, and maybe tips that can be helpful for all those language teachers that are here. For example, we did focus and paid special attention to the development of inner peace and enhancement of well-being in our classes. We found that particularly important. I teach in the practicum, so our future teachers are also teaching remotely. So we did pay special attention to the development of this inner peace dimension. Following what Tammy was saying, that if inner peace, right, is not experienced, it is quite difficult to experience peace in maybe larger dimensions. So we did include activities for that involved emotion regulation, because of course the context made it really hard for us to be centered and in peace, because we are all living, right, these turbulent times where unpleasant emotions are sometimes predominant, and the stress and the uncertainty that we're facing, and fear and a great deal of anxiety. So we did include emotion regulation activities. Also, what happens, and at least in my context, right, as peace is contextual, as Tammy was saying, I can tell you about my context in particular. What we have observed in some classes is that students have a very hard time, teachers and students, right, to really connect deeply, to look into the eyes. Some students don't even turn their cameras on or their mics on to participate. So I think that those activities that involve developing deep connection, maybe through mindfulness exercises, through the development of active listening, keeping eye contact, also integrating the importance of nonverbal language, right? How these gestures and the body language that we can accompany, right, communication with is essential right now. So there are many activities that can help us create these spaces where maybe in regular classrooms it's easier because that's a given, but now we have a screen dividing us. So we should really bring back these aspects that help us connect in a human way, right? Because there's a lot of connection through apps and through virtual platforms, but we need human connection to accompany that virtual connection, right?
I'd like to say something here. I think that we need humor and fun in these connections, because this is a very rough time, as you say, for everybody involved. So a lot of in the book, we have over 50 activities that you can pick from if you're interested. And some of them are just really fun and delightful and humorous. And I like that. And then there are also some very serious ones that make us think deeply about what peace is in various settings. So one of the things I'm happiest about is those activities. And Maddie took a step in managing those for us.
And what happened is that, of course, that this book, it was a long process, of course, as you all know. So the pandemic hit us when we were finishing the book. And of course, we have to think, and this is going to take longer than what we thought, right? And maybe some classes do go virtual, or maybe we start doing like a hybrid thing in many institutions where we have both types of classes. So the good thing would be, and our responsibility as teachers would be how to adapt these activities that we presented in the book in order to make them work in these virtual contexts. And we have several ideas for that as well, of course, right? For example, just one of the activities that we always like to include to engage in a discussion and to start conceptualizing about peace is asking students, okay, what do you understand by peace? What is peace to you? Now, of course, we can get them to express that through and create art through visual, through visuals, through apps. There are tons of applications where they can make virtual posters or record themselves representing what peace is to them. So I think that it requires the creativity of teachers. It's always been like this, right? And teachers can either adapt the existing material to add these peace-related ideas and tasks that engage reflection on the importance of peace and how to embody it. And they can also add different types of activities that have to do with this, how to create peace inside the classroom as openers, as closures, including techniques that have to do with contemplative practices, with positive psychology. There's a whole lot of ideas out there in the book.
I'll build on what Rebecca and Maddie were saying. I think that we can, your original question was, how can we incorporate peace building activities in a curriculum in which we are, worried about standardized tests or a certain content, or, we have to teach a certain curriculum, or our educators have to do that as well. And I think we build that into the curriculum. And one of the things that I have built into my first year composition curriculum, I teach in Montgomery, of course, and I have a diverse student population. I teach international students and I teach our domestic students, many of whom are from here in Alabama. And I took Laura and Tammy, correct me if I mess up the pronunciation, Mahalingapa, and Terry Rodriguez and Nihat Polat's chapter on critical language awareness and social justice pedagogies. And I incorporated some of their ideas with that critical language awareness into the teaching of the assignments that are in our first year composition curriculum. So my students write a critical cultural narrative at the beginning of the semester, and then they build on that by looking at a critical media analysis. And then they also further that, they're getting ready to start their own multimodal counter narratives where they speak back against the cultural scripts. And that's one idea from this book, that as soon as, I was the one who did the, I was one who had a lot of hands-on editing on that chapter. I immediately incorporated that into my curriculum. And I think that we have space to incorporate these things within our curriculum, even with the content that we have to teach. One other thing that I will add, I had a group of international graduate students and a group of international freshman students, and I had my domestic students from here in Alabama. When the pandemic hit in the US and we shut down and we suddenly were remote, that's when engagement in virtual spaces is very important for building peace and helping students maintain whatever sense, as Tammy said, it's contextual, whatever sense of inner peace they can. I did a lot of individual checking in with students. If they suddenly went dark because they were used to a classroom community, I was reaching out to them. And I think that that's what we have to do still. Most of my students are not coming to the classroom. We gave our students the option that if they didn't feel like comfortable coming to the physical space, that we would, use this Zoom platform, which we're very grateful for, to simultaneously have them in the classroom. And so I will, typically yesterday I went down to campus and I did not see one student in person. All of my students were on my computer in my office. But we have to learn how to build classroom community, which will help build that intergroup piece and that inner peace for students in these times. And I think it's an adaptability skill that we just need to do. And many of the activities that Maddie was speaking about can be pivoted to those remote spaces.
Definitely. And the answer in a nutshell, Flo, is should we give a room for peace building in our classes? More than ever, I would say. This pandemic has taught us that we're all interconnected, that we depend on each other, right? That all the dimensions are intertwined, and the pandemic reflects that perfectly, how our actions, right, have consequences on others, and how we can build peace In a similar way that unfortunately this pandemic has had a contagion effect, we can do that with the building of peace. That's our hope, right? Creating greater and greater ripples of peace, but starting from little actions and small and everyday actions.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you. We have had a few audience questions now, so I'm going to just start with a couple of those. These ones are for Rebecca, and they're about, we've had a couple from different people about strategies. First we had from Lilia Borquez, and I'm really sorry for the pronunciation there. Have you found that peacekeeping is fed by the strategies you wrote about decades ago? And then,
wow.
and that's, sorry, there's like a two thing, because Maria Magdalena would also like to know about the future of strategies. She says, how do you see the future of strategies relating to these emerging topics covered in the book?
Okay, that's a wonderful question. I didn't think anybody would bring that up, but I am so glad to hear it. Peace building can actually be taught in similar ways to how we have always taught learning strategies. One way is by demonstrating in our own lives how we enact peace. Another way, that is not necessarily telling people about it, but it's living it. Then another way that we teach strategies and we teach peace is to start talking about it and explaining the different aspects. Like, what do we mean by inner peace? What is it to be a friend and to be somebody who is a loving family member? What does it mean to deal with people from other races in a peaceful way, and other religions and other cultures? So then we start talking about it. Then we start sharing strategies for dealing with people in various situations, and for also calming ourselves down in this rough time, ways to soothe ourselves so that we can be peaceful with other people. So there's a really good parallel between teaching of strategies and teaching of peace. And I guess you could say, we could talk about peace strategies. And certainly there are books written about conflict resolution strategies. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's another book that we have to write.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
I've got a question for Melinda. Has the process, specifically about the book now, has the process of putting together an edited collection across continents at such a testing time for the world given you further insights into the need for tolerance and collaboration?
I think it has. I think, well, I'm blessed to have three wonderfully collaborative co-editors. And if you think about it, we've been in 3 different time zones. Dr. Oxford and I are in the same time zone. But, Tammy would often, respond to emails. I'd wake up in the morning and she would have responded while I was asleep. Maddie, was in there close to that, but we haven't, sat down in a room together all together in a physical space. And I think that we learned how to collaborate across the miles. Thankful to technology for that. But I also think that the 4 of us have our personal characteristics and our academic passions that have been complementary to one another. Because, if we had, a looming deadline for a segment of the book, Dr. Oxford and I are very type A personalities. and we'd be like, oh, this has to get done. And Matilda would be the one coming up with the plan to get it done. And Tammy would swoop in with the humor and everybody chill. And she'd also have, let's just do this, ladies. And I think that we have we knew how to collaborate before that. The four of us are academic professionals, but I think that we also just we knew and valued each other's personalities and gifts as we went through this process. Now, I also want to say that we need to realize that we have authors from all over the world with whom we have collaborated with, and who have been so gracious as to provide their knowledge for this volume, and it's wonderful, applicable knowledge, theoretically based. And I think that they too need to be seen as collaborators in this work.
Great, thank you very much.
And one more thing I do want to add, okay? On a personal level, the four of us have had personal trials through all of this. Probably the most impactful was the passing of Dr. Oxford's mother, and during this process, and that was quite devastating for her, and we hurt for her with that. And so I think that we did all collaborate to pick up and keep moving forward. And at least 3 of us have had close family members who either have been or are ill from the COVID-19 virus. My mother right now is in the hospital in Illinois battling this. And I know Maddie has family members as well. So, you know, if we think about inner peace, we've all had to deal with our own inner peace as we've been writing and editing about the dimensions of peace. And I think that has, you know, that's proved a little bit of a trial with collaboration, but it's also, you know, allowed us to rely on each other and strengthened those collaborative ties.
Indeed.
We need to mention,
yeah.
Maddie, could you, if you don't mind, just tell people what happened around your house? You know, the fires.
Yeah,
and
yeah. I mean, just
a
couple of weeks ago, right? I mean, of course, life passes as we work on these large projects. The same happened when I was doing my PhD. All sorts of horrible things happen together with the wonderful things, right? Life, adult life. And these couple of weeks ago, I've had family members with COVID-19 and horrible fires in my favorite place on earth, which is Alpa Corral here in the hills. So yeah, it was really hard to regulate my emotions, to find my inner peace, to find optimism, and those great ideas that we try to foster within positive psychology. So I think that what Mel and Rebecca are saying is that the writing of this project, together with the many wonderful authors that contributed to this, is the clear example of what peace is and how it should be enacted. It required dialogue, trust, conflict resolution, right? Optimism, but being able to overcome all sorts of obstacles because we trust each other and because we resorted to dialogue every time it was necessary, because we were honest, right? And because we love each other, of course we do. So I think we wrote about peace but while enacting peace, positive peace.
Yes.
Thank you, Matilde. I've got another question from an audience member, and maybe Tammy, you might answer this one. My teacher education course has pre-service teachers worried about their uncertain future. How does one help build inner peace when one's future is so unsettled? And that is from Maria Nikos.
Oh.
Yeah, Martha.
Hi, Martha.
I'm glad it wasn't one of my students because I'd have a
wonderful Martha, right?
You know, it's help me out. You know, inner peace. It's funny how. Okay, my number one parenting thing with my kids from the time they were born was I tried to teach them there are certain things within your control and certain things that are outside of your control. And those things over which you have control, you make yourself goals, you set strategies, and you move towards that. Everything that is outside of your control, you got to let it go. You got to let it go. So while, of course, helping someone else to find peace is something that we do out of a sense of deep humanity, at the same time, there has to be a point at which individuals understand I've done what I can, and I have to at some point say, I can't control this. This isn't something that is within my control. So if you're a student and your professor is not in a good place, which is like many teachers that's happening right now, just like I have many students who are not in a very good place right now. Mm-hmm. It goes both ways, right? As a teacher, I reach out and do everything I can. Students reach out, say, hey, the students might not think that their professors or their teachers need to hear, but we really do, right? Mm-hmm. So it's great to reach out, help one another try to find peace, but at the same time, there has to be a point at which you say, I've done what I can, and this is no longer within my mm-hmm. wheelhouse of control. Because then the student will lose the peace as well. So yeah, that's how I would answer that question, I think.
Thanks, Tammy.
You can also say, okay, I've given what I can. Now, why don't you go over and talk to the person? Talk to your best friend, work it out with some other people. I really like the concept, Tammy, of just saying that we cannot do what we want to do ourselves for the students. Some things are beyond us. So I appreciate that honesty.
We've got another question from an audience member, Patty Ash from Lima, Peru, who says, how can we raise awareness within our learners who are using social media about the peace language they should use instead of replying with more negativity, which leads to a vicious circle?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I can start with that answer, because that was related to one of the activities that I was going to mention about. I guess I didn't have time to do it before. That is, I mean, now that our students and ourselves, like all of us, are communicating so much via social media, we should, the importance of how we're communicating, right, via those means is definitely important. There's one activity that we've called mindful clicking, for example, in which we help our students really be aware of the words they're using, right, of what they want to post, of the effect that's going to create once they post it, because nowadays we see all the time, right, that people are just posting whatever comes to their minds, sometimes with such hatred and such violent language, that I think that we should be especially and particularly aware of how we're communicating via social media and in virtual platforms. And, posting doesn't have a softer effect than when we write in some other way. So yeah, being mindful as to what words we use when posting, what we're posting that for, right? What effect that might create on others, whether we're hurting others. And another piece of advice would be getting our students to think, or to at least to give it a second thought, and avoid responding or reacting when you are too emotionally involved, right? Or at least, giving it some time to say, okay, do I really want to answer that right now in that way? Or at least, or maybe taking deep breaths and reflecting on what's happening, and then deciding whether you do want to keep on with those negative and strong words or not. I think that is something super important to be focusing on now in our classes, with not only with teenagers and children, but adults too, right?
Anyone want to add anything to that?
Do you want to add something, Tammy, Mel, Rebecca?
Otherwise, I've got another question lined up, so I can ask that one. We've got this one from Alan Quesada, who says, who says, how can we translate and/or operationalize peace building strategies in our classrooms and remote teaching?
What was the last part that you just said?
How can we translate and/or operationalize peace building strategies in our classrooms and remote teaching?
We have a good fix on how this can be done in the regular classroom. And I am working with JALT, the Japan Association of Language Teachers. I'm going to be doing, actually, Maddie and I are going to be doing a workshop together where we are going to be teaching these strategies on Zoom to a lot of people in Japan. And we will be able to find out what are the best techniques for doing this. I wouldn't say that we have a handle on it yet. Well, maybe Tammy does. Maybe Maddie does. I don't know. Maybe everybody else does, but I will know a lot more about how to do this through Zoom in about another month, less than a month. And I would be happy to share this. And Maddie and I are doing this. We would be happy to share this in any way you want. And
well, I guess I mentioned some ideas at the beginning when I was mentioning the types of problems we're facing nowadays when we are teaching and learning virtually and what we can do. Of course, there's no time to cover everything, but for example, in breakout rooms in Zoom, we can include activities to help our students develop active listening, to really understand each other and develop empathy, to learn how to practice active listening in these virtual spaces. Peter and Tammy wrote a wonderful chapter, as they were saying, about the power of nonverbal language and how that contributes to peace, and that can be incorporated also into virtual classes. As I was saying before, the power and the role of our body language and gestures in virtual spaces is also super important because it helps create better classes, right? With more human contact. We've lost even the ability to hug each other, to kiss each other, especially in my culture where human contact and touch is so important, right? So again, the screen is dividing us, so we should kind of compensate with these peace building strategies, compensate for the lack of human contact that we're having, right? So I think that our responsibility is even greater now. How can we make this type of education more human, right?
And
but yeah, we will be working on this in the next month, Rebecca. Like
yes,
starting tomorrow, I guess.
Yes, actually, true.
Tammy, yeah, you were going to say something.
Yeah, first of all, that question came from mi amigo Tico. Hey. I was on a Fulbright in Costa Rica, and that was Alan Quesada, my friend. So I haven't seen him in ages. So here's the thing. And my students who are online right now will attest to this. The first day that we were in class this semester, I told them from the very beginning, use that chat box as the place to build rapport. Mm-hmm. Honestly, that chat box going crazy with all of support of each other, mm-hmm. Sidebarred conversations that don't pertain to anything that we're saying, but it's going to lift somebody else up. I want that in the chat box. And, you know, I look at those chat boxes, I look at all the amazing emoticons, right? Right, Jen? We have the amazing chat boxes. Right. And those chat boxes is the number one place, and the discussion board, mm-hmm. Discussion boards, but the chat box for me is that place where we can spontaneously mm-hmm. support one another, care about one another, you know, give each other peace of mind. You know, we have rules that you know, nobody puts anything negative in the chat mm-hmm. box. We're always going to be very building up, you know, doing, you know, confidence building things. And it's just, you know what, I look at that chat box at the end of every class and I go, gosh, I love these guys. Such an amazing, you know what, and it's an even better tool because people put things in the chat box that they would never say to somebody's face.
True. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that it kind of comes back to this engagement. Tammy's talking about fostering engagement, intergroup engagement, and then, you know, starting off a school term, building that classroom community. And you can do that in online spaces just as much as you can do that in remote spaces. You just have to look for those avenues. And one thing that I've done is I've set up I gave my students my cell number, and they will reach out in text before they will email, and just that closer proximity that they feel. And they'll text about anything. I mean, I know which students are ill. I know which students are going through, you know, family issues. I know which students have lost jobs, who just is, you know, not doing well right now. And I know what's going right too. And another thing that a lot of my colleagues have done, they've set up other platforms outside of the school learning management
What's
system.
that?
Yeah, they're using something here in the US. Slack is one of the more popular ones, and they'll have different channels. And you know, our composition director was talking last week that, you know, she will send out a Slack message and say, hey, tell me what you cooked today. What did you cook? And it can be anything from ramen noodles to, you know, some of these students are quite good cooks, and just, you know, talking about things that are real and life. And that's how you build classroom community. And it can be done in remote spaces just as much as done in the classroom.
Right. One other activity.
Yeah. Sorry, would you mind if I just jumped in? I think
no, yes, please. Yes.
So I'm kind of aware of the time, and we've got 2 more questions from the audience. It would be nice to be able to answer them. Thanks. So we've got one from Dario Vanegas, who says, can the authors share how they see peace building and positive psychology in connection to critical pedagogy and emancipatory practices for social justice? Anyone's free to answer that one.
Well, we think several of the chapters in the book are very, very good about social justice pedagogy. And we believe very strongly in the value of it. We realize that not every country, not every education system wants us to be thinking about that. And it is a tough thing, but we encourage, it's a tough thing politically, let's put it that way. But we encourage you to get hold of the chapters in the book that are socially oriented, that deal with equality and justice, and see, and then start talking to people about the in there. Not just with us editors, but with the authors of those chapters, and then with people that you know. And there are very many good ideas about critical thinking, critical media analysis, things that Melinda mentioned in those chapters. So that's an issue we'd be glad to talk about another time, but just want to mention, go for those chapters.
Thanks, Rebecca. And then I've got one final question, which I guess is to all of you. How does it feel to have completed the project? And that's from William Morgan.
It feels great.
It feels wonderful.
This was my first book project, and I think it was also Matilde's first book project. And I think she and I, it was an experience. But I couldn't imagine going through this experience with any other co-editors, though. But we were fortunate that Tammy and Rebecca had been through this many times, so they knew what they were doing, sort of led us. But it does feel good and I can't wait until you all get it published and get it into my hands, because I have been telling everybody I know about this book. Dr. Oxford and I were talking last night about how this book isn't just applicable to language education. It is applicable to education, all educational contexts, content areas. We were talking about social studies, science, math. I mean, we were talking, civics. We were talking about it all, and it can all peace building strategies can be explicitly and implicitly built into pedagogy.
Oh,
Transformative. I would define it as transformative. Writing this project was transformative, right? Indeed. Yes, Rebecca, sorry. You wanted to say something.
I wanted to actually ask you to tell people, you have developed a system for integrating these peace activities and peace ideas into working with regular textbooks. How have you managed to work these ideas into a set curriculum with standard textbooks? I know how you've done it, but I wanted you to say.
Are you talking to me, Mati, or Mel?
I'm talking to you.
Mati?
To Mati.
Okay. I wrote my dissertation on this topic, right? And one of the results, just to be super brief, the pre-service teachers integrated these peace building activities in their own classrooms. And one thing they found out was difficulties in how to implement them because of the lack of existing material out there, the lack of peace building activities in the textbooks that we usually use to teach at primary school and secondary school. So we started focusing in our practicum classes on how to adapt material, right? In order to integrate these peace dimensions into the regular activity sequences that you use to teach language. So there are, the adaptations can be small because, as I was saying before, there are peace-related values and topics included in these textbooks, right? We all know. Sometimes what happens is that they lack the reflective part or the part where we raise consciousness on the importance of fostering peace and how to do it, so the action part. So these adaptations involve these sort of things where we add reflection, where we add consciousness, and where we highlight, right, and maximize the peace-related topic that can be exploited in those sequences of activities, right?
I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up there because that's all we've got time for today. But thank you so much to Rebecca, Melinda, Matilde, and Tammy for joining us. And thanks so much for watching at home as well. We really appreciate it. We hope that you enjoyed it. And if you'd like to buy the book, you can get 50% off with the code PEACE50, PEACE 50 on our website. Thanks very much for joining us, and have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm so glad we had this time together.